to the Transportation Committee of the great city of Los Angeles. We have a quorum. I'm the chair, Bill Rosendahl. Joining me is Jose Huizar and Paul Koretz. So we have a quorum and we can start business. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had a great holiday season. Okay. We have public comment card. We have some filed cards here for item special 1, 6, 5, and I don't know if this is 1 through 3, or is that you want to do 3 of them? Plus the 4th one?
I'll do first.
Okay. All right, colleagues, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Bill. Okay, let's go through the agenda. Where's my, here, right here, huh? Okay. It's suggested, colleagues, that item 1, 2, and 3 should go on consent. However, with Dr. Williams here wanting to speak on those 3, why don't you come up, Dr. Williams, and we'll do both public comment with you and those items that you have expressed interest in, though they were on, could have been on consent. We'll give you anywhere you want to stay. So with that as a backdrop, do public comment first. Public comment.
Public comment. Okay.
You have public comment cards,
Yep.
plus you have 1 through
Yep.
3.
Okay, public comment. The basic element is, how do we get the LA City Caltrans agreement regarding the 710 North extension through El Sereno rescinded? Simple. It was done during Sam Yorty's period, long ago and far away. Snyder was involved in it, and more recently, Garcetti, Reyes, and Huizar have a resolution to the city councils to say no surface construction. But Caltrans is banging ahead, and we would like to have the agreement, current agreement, rescinded. There's also an element that our LA 32 Neighborhood Council voted against support, and thereby, I guess, against the project on the Soto Mission Huntington Drive intersection. Why? Primarily because we look forward to another 2,000 to 4,000 cars per day going on Huntington Drive, because once you expand that intersection and the Soto Road down to the 10, boom, it becomes an alternative to the Fremont. So we voted against that. Okay. Item 1.
Okay,
1
before
through...
you talk about item 1, please.
Yeah, why don't I read these? Item number 1, 2, and 3, they're all City Attorney and Board of Transportation Commission reports and ordinances for increasing the speed limits. Item 1 is to increase the speed limit from 35 to 40 miles per hour for Roscoe Boulevard between Balboa and Topanga Canyon Boulevards and between Jason Avenue and Valley Circle Boulevard. Item number 2 is to increase the speed limit from 35 to 45 miles per hour for Tampa Avenue between Parthenia Street and Ventura Boulevard. And item 3 is to establish a speed limit on Mason Avenue between Trentino Lane and Tulsa Street at 45 miles an hour and increase the speed limit from 35 to 45 miles per hour for Mason Avenue between Tulsa Street and Victory Boulevard.
Okay. Items 1 through 3. Put them all together. Speed kills. Well, a documented fact. When they had a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit in the United States, the number of deaths, fatalities, injuries, and damages decreased. Increasing it, I know, is for the radar guns. However, there are alternatives to making it suitable for radar enforcement, which is ineffectively done, and usually finds that cars are at least 5 miles to 10 miles or more above the speed limit. Therefore, how can you reduce the capacity of those streets? Simple one, make them more pedestrian friendly, make them more bicycle friendly, make more bicycle parking areas, make better intersections so that the kids don't have to have a safe route from school to home. And safe routes are great. However, they're not consistent with jacking the speed limits from 35 to 40, 40 to 45, and above. We all know that everybody's speeds exceeds the speed limit. Common is 5 to 10 miles an hour. So put in Bicycle lanes. That narrows the travel lanes and thereby reduces the number of times that you're going to have to increase speed limits. So, that's all.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Did you read 2 and 3?
Yes, they were all
Okay, great. Do I have a motion to move on consent?
So moved.
So moved. Second, okay, unanimous, we passed them. Okay, that takes care of 1, 2, and 3. And we have another general public comment card. Come on up, Michael Calderon, and then, of course, you will be coming back for item number 4.
And just carry on.
Carry on.
That's okay.
Hey, I like that.
Good, good. I'm here in front of you because I'd like to, on both issues, I got a different issue here, but basically I see corruption in the city of Los Angeles in the transportation department. And the reason why I say that is because we have 2 standards, one for the public and one for city employees and vehicles. It seems that police vehicles, city employee vehicles, park where they want and do basically what they want, talk on their cell phones and everything else, and they're exempt. Okay? When you start differentiating the public from the employees, it's biased, it's also corrupt. You are taking money from the city, basically. You're robbing the city blind. The city is entitled to parking tickets, to other violation tickets, and just because you have a badge does not mean you're exempt from it. And to me, it's, what do they call that? When you break the law under the authority of the badge, you swore to uphold the law, not to break the law. So when you're breaking the law and in a conspiracy mode where someone else is not citing you, I see 2 people breaking the law here, and I see you defrauding the city out of revenue. If you're breaking the law, get the ticket just like Bob Smith will, and it's not up to the enforcer to decide whether he's guilty or not. He broke the law, let the court decide. But in the situations that I'm talking about, they're not even citing them. The city has got the police department talk to DOT or whoever does the parking for public safety. Public safety says they're not going to do it, and it goes back and forth, and nobody does nothing about it. And the city gets cheated out of revenue. I received a parking ticket out of, in my opinion, retaliation for something where I wasn't even parked. I know it because I was at jury duty that day.
I appreciate you saying that. That particular issue, Paul, who's the gentleman? Robert Anderson. Robert Anderson. Yeah, where's Robert? Robert, could you do me a favor? This is finished public comment. Will you talk to him on the side about that ticket he's talking about? Appreciate that very much. Okay. Thank you for your public comment. Now we are going to item number 4.
Item number 4 is a DOT report relative to executing contracts to secure the services of full-time pedestrian coordinator and an assistant coordinator for a combined cost not to exceed $250,000, and draft the Safe Routes to School Strategic Plan and Citywide School Safety Assessment Study.
Somebody want to explain this real quickly? Staff? Anybody here for this one? Well, we want to continue it, actually, so there's no one here for that. Colleagues, let's continue item number 4 to the meeting of January 25th. With your support on that? So moved.
It's referred to Personnel Committee. I think there were some issues related to how we were going to hire the person and what was the proper processes. So if we can refer it, continue it and refer it to Personnel Committee, if they can hear that, and then it would come back to us once that's all worked out.
So moved. Sounds right. Colleagues? Great. So done. Thank you. Okay, next item.
Next item is item number 5, which is a Board of Police Commissioners report relative to city public safety vehicle parking adjacent to red curbs.
Yes, and staff is coming up at the same time, though. Yes, I'd like you to let Mr. Carrion know that. Gentlemen.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Let's get Mr. Carrion. Come on up front and hear the staff. They're talking about your item number 5. Okay. The question is, do you want to speak beforehand, before they speak, or after?
Wait till they speak.
Pardon me?
I'd like to speak after them.
Great. Okay. So move. Yeah.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Robert Andalon of the Department of Transportation. At the last Transportation committee meeting, there was a request to come back with some citation numbers as far as the citation numbers issued to police officers. During calendar year 2010 and 2011, there were 327 tickets issued to police vehicles that were contested. Of those that were contested, 243 were found not valid, 84 were found valid. The ones that were found not valid or dismissed were dismissed based upon the circumstances provided in the form of a letter by a commanding officer. So they were in the performance of their duties under the Vehicle Code and Municipal Code. Those tickets would be dismissed.
Gentlemen, do you want to make any further comments?
I can just address kind of what our perspective is.
Sure.
And our parking rules as far as department vehicles are concerned.
Your name, please?
I'm sorry, Blake Chow, Commander Blake Chow, and Commanding Officer, Counterterrorism and Special Operations Bureau. And next to me is Sergeant Sean Carmody.
Thank you.
Basically, we've outlined and memorialized our policy in several Department Traffic Coordinator notices, the latest one being September 27th, 2011. It mirrors the Department of Transportation policy regarding parking of department vehicles at, in the street at red curbs and things like that. Basically, what it says is that, our department vehicles, they have to be properly ID'd with either the E-plate or a placard. The parking regulations for emergency vehicles, they're exempt from all parking regulations when they're responding to emergency calls. So that includes red curbs, meters, loading zones, things like that when they're going to an emergency call. For routine matters, the government vehicles are only exempt in time limit and meters, and there are no exemptions for the whole laundry list of parking restrictions that are listed in the document. But we've made efforts to educate our people with these notices, put it on the land. Anytime something's brought to our attention where one of our vehicles has violated a parking regulation, that information goes to the commanding officer. They'll investigate it, and we take appropriate action.
Could we have an explanation of the jurisdictional role GSD and LADOT have in enforcing parking violations?
Both GSD and LADOT are responsible for issuing parking citations. The lines of demarcation would be GSD would patrol City Hall specific areas. So the numbers I gave you earlier included both GSD and DOT parking citations issued.
And so both LADOT and GSD follow them?
Both GSD and DOT follow the Vehicle Code as well as the Municipal Code as far as issuing parking citations.
Okay, great. Two, has LADOT prepared a list of parking citations issued to city vehicles? If so, how many are there? Is that what we just heard?
The number I quoted to you was the number that was given to LAPD vehicles only during those 2 calendar years. I can come back and report at a later time with the full complement of city vehicles. Again, those are also enforced in the same manner.
Okay. Now, what happens to such citations?
The citations that are issued to city vehicles, there's a notice sent to General Services since they are the quote registered owner of the vehicle, and then we then receive information from GSD as to who the driver of the vehicle was or who the vehicle was assigned to. We then send the collection letters to that individual.
Did the LAPD officers receive appropriate training on parking exemption policies?
The information is distributed to each of the contact individuals within other departments who have mileage placards, and then from there, the information is disseminated among all the staff members currently assigned.
Under what circumstances would an LAPD officer be considered to be on official duty and therefore exempt from parking restrictions, or conversely, off-duty? Explain.
Well, it would be difficult for the parking enforcement officer to distinguish between those 2 scenarios. So the assumption is that if a vehicle is out in the field, that it is in the performance of their official duties.
And my last question is, and how would LADOT and GSD officer be able to tell whether an LAPD vehicle parked at curbside was either on or not on official duty?
The department wouldn't have that information. It would be, the assumption is that the police officers are following the rules that have been given to them by their superiors, and so they are in the performance of their duties.
Colleagues, can you either ask questions now, or I could let Mr. Carrion speak?
No, let them speak.
Okay. You all for that? Okay.
I asked the same question. How do you know when they're on duty, or when it's, Mr. Chow Blake said very eloquently, in an emergency? Going to court is not an emergency. It states it right here in, when doing a follow-up, they are not allowed to park in the red. My biggest gripe is right here on Broadway. That whole block is taken. I've got pictures on my camera right now. 2 police cars at the corner, another police car at the bus stop, and people have to walk in the middle of the street to catch the bus. Because if you got a black and white, maybe Mr. Chow can attest to this, if it's an emergency, you put your red lights on. You caught that first day in school. But if it's not an emergency, you park your vehicle there and you go do your business. So parking enforcement should, with common sense, realize this is not an emergency because this black and white does not have his lights on. And there's nothing, no officer within blocks that can attest to it. And it's around the courthouse. City of Los Angeles also has a policy, you cannot build a building unless you have adequate parking for your employees. I talked to the chief. He put out flyers right across the street from this building in the new police station. They're parked out there right now. It says no parking tollway zone. My thing is very simple. If you don't like the law, change it. But if the law is there, enforce it. Just because you have a badge does not mean you're exempt from the law. I take it personal when an officer breaks the law. He's sworn to uphold. Okay? And then it's covered up by other officers saying, well, maybe it's an emergency. Well, if it's an emergency, put your lights on. There's ways of distinguishing that. It's not an emergency to go to court, because court is a follow-up. It states it right here. Gentlemen,
yes, I would like to address the issue of emergency vehicles. The California Vehicle Code allows public officials who are in emergency situations or construction projects to park on city streets. It defines authorized emergency vehicles in the Vehicle Code section. It's section 165. An authorized emergency vehicle is any publicly owned vehicle operated by the following persons, agencies, or organizations. Any federal, state, or local agency, that would be the city, department, or district employee employing peace officers, as that term is defined in Chapter 4.5, commencing with Section 830 of Part 2 of the Title 3 of the Penal Code. That would be LAPD. For the use of those officers in the performance of their duties. The performance of their duties. That could be going to court or whatever they're required to be doing when they're on official duty. It doesn't require that they put on flashing red lights. It just means in their performance of their duties. And that's under the State Vehicle Code section. So therefore, as long as they are performing any official duty as required by their commander or by their job duties, they are an authorized emergency vehicle under the State Vehicle Code section.
Fair enough. Let me just ask you this. We brought up Broadway and that they're bumper to bumper there and you can't get out to get the bus and you can't deal with that. What's your response to that when you
I don't know. I would have to refer to the Department of Transportation. They would have to look at Broadway and do a study as to how vehicles are actually parked there, whether they are if there's some sort of violation, whether they're violating their regulations or the regulations as mentioned by the office.
Could we ask you to respond to that? Because it sounds to me, if Broadway is a street where there might be a bus stop or this or that, and if there's a vehicle there, he questions the legitimacy of the vehicle to begin with to be there, but just the general notion of Broadway there, back to back.
right here, if you want to plug it into your
No, I got it.
thing. There's a new one just taken today.
Yeah, I want them to respond.
Sure. Obviously, a police vehicle shouldn't be parking there based upon our current policy, which is outlined in the Department Traffic Coordinator Notice. And it's issued also on the back. There's the guidelines on the back of the placard that list where they're allowed to park and where they're not allowed to park. My understanding, I'm sorry, my understanding, there are citations, I think majority of the citations are issued around the courthouse, up on Broadway and on Temple. That's majority of the, there are.
Sure. So in the performance of duties, they could still park, for example, if they go to court or they are here at the main station for some business, they could park in time limit parking zones, no parking allies, commercial loading zones, preferential parking districts, coin-operated parking meters are exempted from that, so they could still park there, correct?
As long as they're performing their duties, they can park there.
Their duties. But the question arises, what about a red curb? That is not allowed, even if they're performing their duties.
Well, actually, they are pretty much, they can park in most places throughout the city as long as they're performing their duties.
As long as they're performing, so going to court is performing their duties, coming to the headquarters is performing their duties, and that's Mr. Carrion, who lives in my district, has asked me to get some clarification. He's been coming to public comment for years now, raising the same issue, so I told him I would submit this motion to get clarification. This is news to me. I thought that...
Well, again, it's the vehicle code and the municipal code do explicitly provide authority for law enforcement vehicles to park pretty much wherever they need to be in the performance of their duties.
Mr. Carrion, that's our answer, and it seems like if
This
they're...
right here, this is what you guys gave me, a fact sheet. The fact sheet on page 2, it stated, furthermore, police vehicles will receive no parking exemptions at any time while on routine business or following parking restriction locations. How can your interpretation and what you're giving me are two different things? Your interpretation are in an emergency. That, you're defining what an emergency vehicle is. The gentleman defined what an emergency vehicle is. This is your fact sheet here.
Yes, sir.
Again, the fact sheet may not have been updated, but it clearly states within the vehicle code and municipal code certain parking exemptions for certain vehicles. LAPD vehicles and other law enforcement vehicles are exempted, as well as ambulances. So there are provisions made to allow for the safe passage and safe parking of those types of vehicles.
So that's the rule, that's the policy, that's the law, and for those vehicles that have been ticketed around the court area, what have they been ticketed for?
Well, some of them have been ticketed, not necessarily in the court areas, but there was the staff that perhaps reviewed them may not have been up to speed on all of the nuances within both the state and the vehicle code. And once this issue was percolating upward, we sat down with both the commanding levels of LAPD and ourselves, and we went through it and verified what the correct interpretation of the vehicle code and municipal code are. And as a result of that, we've advised the staff, this is how it should be done. So going forward, everybody knows the rules. So there might have been some staff members who did not go into the depth of research that we did to be able to verify what the city attorney previously mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kretz.
Yeah, I'm just not clear on this. You can park in a red zone while you're performing your duties, but does that mean that if you could just as easily find a legal space in a parking structure, that you can opt for the more convenient red zone and just park there? Or is it only if you don't have a better opportunity?
You know, I think what's happening is we're interpreting vehicle code versus policy.
Right.
Vehicle code is very clear, is much more general and exempting, according to California State Vehicle Code, allowing these police vehicles to park, you know, with the exemptions. But the policy that I just read off in the department, which mirrors the DOT policy, is a little more restrictive from an administrative standpoint than what the vehicle code is specifying. So in our situation with our vehicles, we require them, if they're going to park in a red zone, they have to be responding to a call. And then if they're on routine business, there are a certain set of circumstances where they're granted parking exceptions, which is outlined in the notice.
So we're writing tickets to people based on their violating policy as opposed to the law.
I'd have to defer to DOT for that. I mean, most of those citations come from what she enumerated, came from the Department of Transportation.
Because if we actually are citing police cars outside a courthouse, it's obvious they are there because they're doing their duty, and so they're not violating state law. But if we're actually writing tickets, we're writing tickets because they're violating city policy. And I don't know if we actually write tickets for violation of city policies or not.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that if it's brought to our attention that somebody feels that one of our police cars is violating a parking regulation, either through notification of the citation written by DOT or somebody calling, we will look in, it goes to the commanding officer of that owns that vehicle, whoever his employees are, and that will kind of start an investigation as to whether or not what his status was. You know, you can't drive down the street and look at a black and white and tell whether or not the officer is on a call or not. There's no requirement that they turn flashing lights on when they're responding to a call. So it's kind of presumptuous to assume that because a black and white is parked in a red zone and his flashing lights are not on, that he's not on a call. You don't know that until you can track down the officer and find out exactly what he was doing.
But obviously, if we just said we've written tickets around the courthouse, the logical assumption, and I'm sure it's the case, the officers that are there because they're performing their duty, but they're in violation of city policy. So do we write tickets for people being in violation of city policy as opposed to actual law?
Well, there may have been situations where citations were issued, not to black and whites, but to other undercover vehicles, for example, that it may have been there, that there was no way for the officer to have known that it was a police vehicle. And after the citation was issued, the commanding officer submitted correspondence that explained the presence of the vehicle for audit purposes so that we would be able to dismiss it. So there is, to answer your question in a short way, yes, we do write citations for that.
I mean, it seems a little fuzzy. And I don't know, as a policy basis, if we think that we should be writing tickets for that or not. I mean,
Well, and if you ask my opinion, we should not be. We should be following the law. Policy is something we developed internally. The law is first and foremost, and that's what we should be doing.
And why aren't we doing it?
Again, there was probably some missing translation of the information to disseminate to all of the employees. But once the certain people got involved and we went back and did all the research, we found what the law states. And until the law changes, my recommendation is we follow the law.
so as a policy matter, do we think it's a good idea or a bad idea in general to have officers allowed to park in the red around, say, a county courthouse to make it easier for them to do their duties? Or do we think they should have to park in a structure and park like everybody else does, except in an emergency?
It's not necessarily known to us whether that vehicle is responding to a call or whether that person is there to direct a witness to the location. We're not sure, so we're not going to make that assumption. So we would assume that they are in fact performing their duties and they chose the safest location to park.
Now, what do we do in a more obvious situation? You see officers parked in the red and nothing seems to be going on, and yet there are a bunch of officers in the local coffee shop. Do we make the assumption that they shouldn't be doing that?
No.
Or that they're in violation? Or
No, we don't make that assumption.
they're also doing
They could be on surveillance, and that would be the most cleanest restroom in the nearby area where they would stop, and the officers would not make the assumption that they're not performing their official duties.
It would also be an extraordinary use of manpower by the department to have to investigate whether the officers are actually on duty or not. I don't know that we have the resources to have our parking officials actually performing that kind of duty.
So, any reason from any of your perspective that we would be looking at tightening this up, or would it make sense to?
I think that the police officials have made their commitment known to you, that they have advised all the employees to park safely and to park appropriately, and I think that satisfies the department's desires.
So basically just try your best to get the word out not to do this inappropriately, but that there's no real practical, appropriate way to enforce this.
That's correct.
Thank you.
If we could just take this a step further, is it at all possible to take the law, which we want to follow, not the policy, but the law, and publish that and see that every officer gets one and every other city employee?
We've started those steps as far as enforcement is concerned, of basically clarifying that portion of the law so that all the traffic officers are aware of that. There's a training bulletin that's being prepared that's going to be disseminated among all the employees, and it'll be discussed at the roll calls to make sure that they're aware of what the law actually does state as opposed to policy that's been in place.
It's very good to hear that, officers. You're in the process of doing that,
Perfect.
getting that information out, getting that facts out. Let me just ask you this, Michael, carry on. Your biggest concern has been Broadway. Is that, explain again what brought all this?
Is abuse of the law, okay? I'm disabled. I pulled into Hollenbeck to file a report of my car being broken in, and there was a police vehicle parked in the handicap spot. And I spoke to Mr. Chow, because he was in charge of Hollenbeck then, and his basic response was, we're building a new police station. We're going to do what we want to do. They were parked on the sidewalk, where children, women with children in strollers couldn't get by. There was a tree. You have photos of this. Mr. Chow has photos of this. When you're parked in the handicap spot because there's no other one, I mean, where does the line, where do you stop? Might as well just let Rafael Perez loose. If you're going to allow your police officers to do what they want when they want to, and it states here, this is what I got from you guys. This is not outdated because this is July 1st of 2011, where it says facts that you cannot do these things, yet you're telling me you can. Why do you guys hand out this stuff? It was handed out by the Traffic Coordinator Section, Emergency Operations Division, and this is dated July 1st. You all have it. If you don't, I've got copies here for you. Okay? It also states parking enforcement policies for government vehicles and mileage. States the same thing. But you can't do that. So I don't know where he's reading from or how he's interpreting his definition of the law of the book he's reading out of. It also goes further to state you cannot park within 2 blocks from your place of business on the street. Yet, right across the street, police vehicles are parking in the red, in a tollway zone, and walking in there and doing their business with impunity. My question is, where does the law stop? I'll go one step further. I filed complaints and complaints. You've got Lieutenant Jerry Rodriguez, officer of ops, who called my employer. And asked my employer what I was doing, making so many complaints that it was starting to bother the chief, and wanted to look in further if I was doing this on my time or county time. That right there is retaliation. What business does somebody have, and how did he get my employee number, my phone number to my employee, to my employer, to call him, asking him to talk to me and stop making complaints? My employer has no business getting involved in what I do in my personal time. And for somebody from the Los Angeles Police Department, Lieutenant Jerry Rodriguez, Office of Ops, to call him and request that I stop that, it should be illegal. Yet, I brought this to the police commission. Oh, they made a big fuss about it, but nothing was done about it. It just swept under the carpet. My thing is this: you don't like the law, change it. Okay? Alhambra, South Pasadena, and their surrounding cities all have police vehicles only. Police vehicles exempt. Why can't the city of Los Angeles do that? You have certain places for them to park. You have a building right here where people can park to go to court. Underground, it's all there. They choose not to. They choose to break the law. My question is, where does it stop? Molesting children? Where does it stop? I'm going to the extreme other end. But if you're allowing them to park illegally, and according to these papers that you guys handed me, your office handed me these papers, it is illegal for them to park there. And it states here, I don't know what he's reading, but it says here, your fact sheet goes along with the parking enforcement policies for government, all government, doesn't say city. And it says that, if Mr. Chow or anybody wants a copy, it's all there for them.
Well, I think once again, we just wanted to reemphasize that the department's policy is to enforce the law. The policy that Mr. Carrion is referring to may have been dated, may have been prepared by someone unfamiliar with the actual vehicle code, actual municipal code, and may have just been repeating something that had been written years ago. So I think when in doubt, always go to the source. The sources of vehicle code, municipal code, and once you have the diligence to do that, you would discover exactly what's there.
City Attorney, do you want to comment any further on what Mr. Carrion just said and what our colleague just said?
Well, right now, the only thing I'm referring to are emergency access vehicles as defined, which are peace officers as defined under the penal code. That's referring to LAPD. That's not necessarily referring to other city employees. So the policy that they have regarding other city employees that are not police officers is valid. They're not granted the ability to park anywhere they want to because they're on official duty. It's just peace officers as defined by the penal code.
Any other comments, gentlemen?
Sir? No?
Okay, there's two things I'd like you to do. I'd like you to
Sure.
get with him over that citation there.
I've already received his phone number, so we can contact him with that citation information.
It's very important. I think his point was raised clearly. Secondly, when he talks about Broadway, and he has photos of Broadway, and some questionable, in his mind at least, of police's cars, vehicles being there, and you can't get access to the bus, and you can't get access to that. I'd like you to look specifically at Broadway and get with him over those particular photos he showed that he took this morning. Okay?
Certainly.
And I'd like you to work this out before it goes to council, and we're going to send this off to council. Okay? And so, colleagues, if it works for you here, we'd like to move this to the council, and then have those two issues.
Note and file? With a note and file recommendation or something else? Okay.
You all feel that way? Okay, so that's what we'll do with this, but before it comes to council, I want those discussions to take place. Okay. Thank you all very much for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and we got another general public comment card, so come on up. I did that before you came in the room, but come on up, Dennis. Dennis Hindman, right?
Right, or Heinemann.
Hindman?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So my general comment, I have a suggestion. We're starting to implement bike corrals, and we've done our first one, and there is going to be a source of funding, but I was thinking about, in terms of a bike corral being furniture, and treating it in a similar fashion as our bus shelters, bus benches, and allowing advertising. This could be in conjunction with perhaps extending a contract to the bus shelter, so they would submit a design, and if it's approved by DOT, we could get many bike corrals put in that way, much the same way we do our bus shelters. So I'm hoping somebody thinks that's a good idea. That would, you've got something like 1,000 bus shelters, and it brings in $1 million, and could be something very similar for the bike corrals, and that would help a lot of small businesses, the food and beverage businesses, and hopefully would help somewhat with the parking problems at night, if you can get, a lot of people coming to use a bike corral instead of using a car. I know Venice, community of Venice, Abbott County could probably have a bike corral there. This is not going to work for every business district. Sometimes they may not want advertising, but to me it would be very similar to a bus shelter. It's just a matter of approving the design so it doesn't interfere with any sites. So you can, the visibility is good for the corner or traffic, and it's a good way to extend it.
Have you presented it to our great bicycle lady over there?
It presented yesterday. And she was saying that, contracts would have to be changed from, I knew there was two separate contracts, one for the benches, one for the shelters. And I thought we could do something very similar for corrals. This would speed the whole process up.
I appreciate that because you're thinking out of the box, and we have to find public-private partnerships to get the things done that we need to do. So I don't want to put you on the spot here on it, but would you get with him again or come on up here and say something about what the options are? And of course, I know there's a lot of people who have problems with advertising in general and how it would be done, and I appreciate that issue as well.
Michelle Mallory, Senior Bike Coordinator, Department of Transportation. When Dennis brought this up yesterday, I mentioned that the city has ad-related contracts now, and that we would have to go into it. We've been looking with the mayor's office at the possibility of ad revenue on the bike share program. So we know it's an extensive issue that would have to be delved into, but I did also assure Dennis that we would look into it. So, we'll follow up with what the work that the mayor's office has done, but right now they're finding that it's going to be difficult to sell ad revenue to do a bike share program, and I expect we're going to have the same sort of problem. So.
Okay, well, I look forward to you maybe proving them wrong by helping us with this idea to take it to the next step.
Okay.
Get back with her again.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
For coming in and speaking. Okay, now we have Dr. Williams on a few others. Cut. Okay, so you're off the line. All right. Alex, you complaining about that? No? Okay.
No complaint.
All right. All right, so now we've done item number 5, item number 6.
Item number 6 is Labange Garcetti motion instructing DOT to report with recommendations necessary to close Yucca Street to through traffic vehicles at Las Palmas, Cherokee, and Whitney Avenues.
And I've been suggested to continue this for 30 days. And why do we want to do that? I want to hear for the record. Continuing it. Come on.
I think we just need some additional information on what mechanisms we were going to propose to close the streets.
Very good. Colleagues, any comments on that? Are you okay for continuing?
That's fine.
30 days? Okay, so moved. Thank you for that. Special agenda item 1.
That's a Weezer Rosendahl motion relative to the acceptance of funding from MTA to be used to fund staff positions in the mayor's office to coordinate and expedite the city's department's efforts in support of Measure R transit project design and construction.
Come on up real quick on this one, explain it. Seems like a no-brainer, but let's just hear it for the record. Or maybe it isn't something to be concerned about. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, council members, I'm Borja Leon with the Mayor's Office, Deputy Mayor. And the item before you is something that, it's something that we really need to do. And the reason is when Measure R was passed in 2008, there was a lot of, thought of the bulk of construction activity. And at that time, a lot of the MTA staff and also a lot of the contractors building these projects always raised issues about third-party reviews. And when I say third-party reviews, those are basically design reviews, inspection, those things that are related where the city has to review before the contractor can actually build. And it further pushes us in an awkward position where we have to expedite these projects with design-build projects. And that's where our MTA's approach of constructing projects is design-build, where you're designing and building at the same time. The motion before you is asking for a transfer of MTA funding, some positions in the mayor's office, to help expedite a lot of the design reviews. And the reason why they asked the mayor's office was because as the executive office, we could actually weigh in and engage in a lot of the departments and help facilitate these reviews or any disputes, even internally with the departments. So with that, if you have any further questions, we're happy to answer them.
Mr. Weezer is the maker of the motion. I second it. So please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you know, Measure R is causing a rapid increase in the number of projects that are going through Metro. As a Metro board member, I certainly see this in the construction committees where we're getting and reviewing more and more projects to move forward, and including the Crenshaw LAX line that is being expedited, and more the contractors, MTA, stakeholders, the community are looking for a single point of contact in the city. And the mayor's office, given that the mayor has several appointments on the board and the involvement with Measure R, it's the right place to have this point of contact. Not to mention that the mayor's office has already formed a project delivery team, which has worked with a number of council offices to move some of those projects forward. I know that in District 11, they worked with Mr. Rosenthal on the I-405 Sepulveda project, and it would allow also the council offices to work with the mayor's office and the mayor's office team to work directly with council offices and all departments to move these projects forward. When I was on the Board of Education and we had our massive school construction program, we did the same thing then. We got one single point of contact in the city as the school district worked with the city to expand sidewalks, put the stop signs at the right place, et cetera, and the same idea is going to happen with this. I think at the end of the day, it's going to continue to expedite all the Measure R projects. It's going to avoid delays. It's going to avoid some of the frustrations that we often hear about large agencies not working with each other, and I think this will smoothen all that out. So the mayor's office brought this to my attention, and as Mr. Rosenthal said, this is a no-brainer.
And I might also say he's on the MTA board, so he brings added energy to it from his own personal experience. I want to ask a series of questions, basically for the record. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I want to take this opportunity to introduce Greg Spots. He's also in the mayor's office, and he's the actual director of the policy delivery or project delivery team.
Great. Pleasure to meet you.
Good afternoon.
Here. Damian Newton, who's a cyclist and a great blogger and everything else, asked us some questions, which Mr. Baxter, my deputy, esteemed deputy, answered, and well done. But I want to go for the record so we have a record of these questions. What is the source of funding that Metro is providing us?
It's from the administrative part of the Measure R budget and also the administrative section of Proposition A and Proposition C.
Second question, how much money are we talking about?
It's a reimbursement for salary hours spent doing this work, up to $383,000 for salary, plus 22.21% for human resource benefits, which is the standard cap rate for grant-funded mayoral positions.
And what is the length of the term of this agreement?
It's a one-year agreement starting September 1, 2011. There was a lot of interest in having us get it up and running sooner rather than later, so we staffed it in advance of finishing the MOU to get reimbursed for it.
Is Metro covering the related costs as well?
Yes, there's a standard. There's different cap rates for different positions in the city, and for grant-funded mayor's office positions, the standard rate is 22.21%, and they're covering that. That covers your health, human resource benefits.
Is this funding for the current fiscal year or next fiscal year?
It's a 12-month period that spans the two, from September to the end of August, and we figured we would all get together with Metro at the end of this, see if this was working for them, and extend or revise accordingly.
So you do have staff working on these projects now?
We do. We have a little bit more than two people, two full-time and one part-time, working on it since September 1, and we're going to bill for those hours retroactively once this is passed.
And what is the scope of their duties?
Sure. There's a variety of different activities we've been engaging in as we proactively look to troubleshoot and expedite here. The most basic part of it is there's an endless stream of submissions of plans these days to the city departments, and we help them decide which ones to react to first to make sure that the projects aren't delayed. Sometimes different departments have conflicting comments about a plan, and in previous times the project manager would bounce back and forth between the departments over a long period of time. Now we're able to convene a meeting, get everybody together, say we're not going to leave here until you guys come to an agreement, so the project has a firm idea of how to proceed with that plan.
I must say I like that a lot.
The project managers like it too.
From all my experience, if we can get everybody on the same wavelength, it really works. How does the mayor's office plan to involve the council in policy and technical issues?
We've worked very closely with council offices every step of the way. In fact, sometimes we actually learn about opportunities to make projects better or community concerns from the council office, who's the closest to the community. So we've worked with CD5 and CD11 on 405 traffic impacts neighborhoods. We've worked with CD3 on deleting unnecessary street widening related to the Orange Line extension that would have taken away parking for local businesses. In every phase, we're working with Councilmember Koretz's office on the possibility of developing a greenway along Expo 2. So pretty much every single thing we've done in concert with the council offices, and actually we're learning a lot from them because they're the closest to the community concerns.
I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Koretz, but also know that CD11 wants that green thing that Mr. Koretz is talking about. We've talked over and over historically in this context of Measure R and everything we do, that wherever we can, we want bicycle lanes. And we know that Expo Line Phase 2, Mr. Koretz and I hopefully will be serving on the board as soon as they finish one. And I can tell you from my perspective, I'll let him speak for himself since he rides the bike more than I do, that wherever we can on Expo 2, we want to put a bike lane the entire route and make it efficient and effective and everything else. And I'm assuming that Phase 1 of Expo is also have done it, or if they haven't, make sure that they do it so one can actually I can get on a bike and go all the way downtown, which I know exactly my Bundy stop is where I would start, Bundy and Olympic, and I'd get right on it and just come down to City Hall, my hat on and all that kind of stuff. So thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Koretz.
Could I just add, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to add to what Mr. Spots commented on, we actually had a presentation to all the council offices. We offered it in November, and we're going to continue on doing that. At a minimum, we'd like to do it quarterly, but if the council offices think we should do it, every month, we're willing to do that.
Great. Appreciate that, too, as well. Mr. Koretz.
No, I agree. I think we've had a great working relationship, and we've gotten a lot of help in CD5, so we appreciate that. I'm just trying to figure out the funding. What would happen if we didn't approve the transfer? How would projects get done?
Borja's group would get smaller, and it would go back to the way it was being handled when there were fewer projects, where things that, you can chime in, but things that became very urgent got handled, but there wasn't a systematic effort to proactively debug them.
I think to add, council member, that's a good question. As far as when you're building these projects, a lot of the risk is part of the delivery of the project. You would add risk, and risk means potential cost increases, time delays, and such forth. So you potentially are creating more risk into all the projects and all the schedules and all the budgets.
It would basically just be inadequately staffed and run into the problems of that, as we often do in other places in city government today, because our staffs have been cut.
That's right.
And part of the reason we've actually been able to get the kind of help and cooperation and good movement on some of these projects is because we've had adequate funding, and presumably this would allow that to continue.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Borja and all your team for thinking ahead, because by getting these funds to fully staff this, we're not, ahead months from now, a year from now, saying, well, we're getting bottlenecked with all these projects, and they're waiting upon city departments to respond, and, are we going to move forward or not? And MTA saying, who do we contact? This is thinking ahead to staff up and get the responses we need so we can continue to move forward. So thank you.
Well, it looks great.
Mr. Chair, I think we have, over here, we have some minor technical amendments to that.
Revised motion.
Right, and the CAO has a different fund number they wanted to do. I'd also recommend that we add the CAO or replace the mayor's office and the city attorney with the CAO. They're the more appropriate entity to be making any technical corrections. So if we can just make those two changes.
We're okay with that.
Okay, and the fund number is?
Yeah. Okay, so moved with those amended comments. And I know this, just in a general sense, Mike Fuhr is talking about upping the ante on Measure R. And if that ante can be upped and we can get these 12 projects simultaneously in a more aggressive path, I can tell you one thing, this is just a comment I'm making, my constituents would very much like to get out of the gridlock we're in. So we're very excited about the opportunity potential that Mr. Fuhrer is putting forward. I talked to the Assembly member yesterday about it, and I'm thrilled, and I understand the mayor has some positive energy, but we'll all wait for ourselves when the appropriate time comes, when it goes forward. But whatever we can do to move forward in getting ourselves out of gridlock is obviously the commitment of our great city. Colleagues, any other comments about anything else? Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you all very
Thank you.
much. We appreciate it. Oh, was there public comment on this? Yes. I thought you did one of these things of no-go and all that. Oh, well, then, hold up our vote for 1 second, folks. We got to be technical here. Come on up, Doctor. If you know, when you did that, wasn't sure what you were doing anymore.
Yes. I deferred 5 to spatial 1.
Go for it.
Okay. Measure R. What is it? It includes one project, 710 North Extension in the city of Los Angeles. This process has been going on for only 40, 50 years. Now, real-time experience, Tiger 1, Tiger 2, Tiger 3. The mayor's office was supposedly guiding us. At Tiger 2, we asked him about how can neighborhood councils get into it and propose projects. He said, well, there won't be a Tiger 3. Well, there was a Tiger 3. Call for projects from MTA. What did they do? They came up with $200 million worth of projects to submit for MTA's county total allocation of $100 million, with no involvement of neighborhood councils in any way, shape, or form. In fact, some staff were told one thing, when in point of fact, the next week, projects were de-obligated, that is, cut, without even staff of council districts knowing it. So when you support Measure R, remember that there is, and it usually goes in as Measure R Transit. Well, in the first column, or in the first paragraph, this one, it was Measure R Transit and Highways and Transit. Highways for LA City equals 710 North Extension. Bad track record between neighborhood councils and the city, mayor, city council, and Department of Transportation as to what's going on. There's no coordination. So, yeah, they need some money, I guess, to have somebody do something, but the real issue is on the ground. 710 North will be dragged along with all the other transit projects, whereas we will get another 10, 15, 20 years of Caltrans being in El Sereno. So I'd highly recommend that transit be supported, but delete highways from any coordination city mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it. Can I have that motion again to move forward with?
So moved.
Okay, so we unanimously have moved forward with the recommendation.
As amended, yes.
Thank you. Any other items? Anybody else has anything else? Adjourn. Thank you all for.